fishing line caught something heavy, and when the fisherman reels it in, he discovers an 80-pound sack filled with human flesh. There were no bones or organs in the sack, just mutilated remains dumped in a lake. The woman who escaped this killer's torture chamber ran down a dirt road, wearing nothing but an iron slave collar and chains. And what she told police about the toy box made seasoned investigators physically ill. This is one of 4 cases so disturbing that the detectives who worked them required counseling just to function afterward. You're about to discover what happens when law enforcement confronts a level of evil that breaks even the strongest minds. Thanks for clicking on this video, and please like, subscribe to this channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with our latest videos. Drop a comment sharing where you're watching from. Let's see which country has the most viewers. Case 1. Robert William Pickton. The 52-year-old pig farmer Robert William Pickton had been living on this property his entire life. Born on October 24, 1949, to pig farmers Leonard and Louise Pickton, Robert's childhood was anything but normal. His mother was demanding, forcing him and his younger brother David to work brutal hours on the farm while prioritizing the livestock over basic hygiene. The boys went to school reeking of manure, unwashed, and wearing filthy clothes, and classmates nicknamed them Stinky Piggy. At 12 years old, Robert raised a calf that became his beloved pet. After 2 weeks, he came home from school excited to see his animal, but his parents told him to check the barn. The boy walked inside and found his pet calf slaughtered, hanging from a hook. That moment broke something inside him. After dropping out of school in 1963, Pickton worked as a meat cutter before eventually taking over the family farm with his brother. When their parents died in the late 70s, the siblings inherited the property and sold parts of it to developers, pocketing over $5 million. Robert Pickton was now a millionaire, but his wealth would fund something unspeakable. The farm became a hub for dark activities. Pickton created an illegal nightclub in a converted slaughterhouse that he called Piggy's Palace, hosting parties with up to 2,000 guests, including politicians, business figures, and members of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. The events were wild, fueled by drugs and alcohol, but behind the revelry, women were disappearing. Vancouver's downtown East Side was home to vulnerable women. Many were sex workers struggling with addiction. These women were easy targets because society had already forgotten them. Between the early 80s and 2002, dozens of women vanished from the streets. But police dismissed the reports because the victims were marginalized. Families screamed for help. Advocacy groups compiled lists of the missing, but law enforcement looked the other way. In March of 1997, a sex worker named Wendy Lynn Eistetter barely escaped with her life. Pickton had handcuffed her at his farm, stabbed her repeatedly, but she fought back, disarmed him, and stabbed him with his own weapon before running away. Both ended up in nearby hospitals. Police arrested Pickton and charged him with attempted murder, but prosecutors dropped the case in January 1998 because they believed Eistetter, who struggled with drug addiction, was too unstable to testify. That decision let him continue killing. Then came that February search warrant in 2002. As police combed through the property looking for weapons, they stumbled upon personal items belonging to missing women. The farm was immediately sealed off. Officers began excavating, and what they uncovered transformed this story into a hunting nightmare. Beneath the soil, in the buildings, scattered across 40 acres of land, investigators found human remains. Not one victim, not 2, but evidence of at least 26 women. Some body parts were found in freezers, some were buried in shallow graves, and others had been fed through a wood chipper before being given to the pigs. The horror of it paralyzed the investigators. Detective Inspector Kim Rossmo had warned years earlier that a serial killer was operating in Vancouver, but his concerns were dismissed. Now, as forensic teams sifted through bone fragments, hair samples, and decomposed tissue, the scale of Pickton's crimes became impossible to ignore. The cost of the investigation reached $70 million by the end of 2003, making it the most expensive criminal inquiry in Canadian history. On February 22, 2002, Pickton was arrested and charged with the murders of Serena Abotswe and Mona Wilson. Over the following months, charge after charge was added. Jacqueline McDonnell, Diane Rock, Heather Bottomley, Andrea Josbury, Brenda Wolfe, and so many more. By May of 2005, he faced 27 counts of first-degree murder. Investigators learned that Pickton had confessed to an undercover officer that he'd killed 49 women and wished he'd made it an even 50. The scope of his depravity was staggering. He would lure women to his farm with promises of money or work, then handcuff them, torture them, and strangle them to death. Afterward, he dismembered the bodies and disposed of them using his pigs and rendering equipment. On March 10, 2004, the government revealed something even more disturbing. Pickton may have ground up human flesh and mixed it with pork that he sold to the public. Health officials issued a warning to anyone who had purchased meat from the farm. The thought that people might have unknowingly consumed human remains sent shockwaves through the community. The trial began on January 30th, 2006. Due to the overwhelming number of charges, the court split them into groups of 6. Pickton pleaded not guilty to 27 counts of first-degree murder. The evidence was overwhelming: DNA samples, personal belongings, and testimony from people who had worked at the farm. Some employees recalled Pickton asking them to dig trenches in his crawl space and spread lime to accelerate decomposition. During the trial, witness Lynn Ellingson came forward claiming she had seen Pickton skinning a woman hanging from a meat hook years earlier. She said she never reported it out of fear for her own life, though she admitted to blackmailing Pickton about it afterward. On December 9, 2007, the jury found Pickton not guilty on 6 counts of first-degree murder, but guilty of 6 counts of second-degree murder. The distinction was subtle but significant. The jury believed he had killed, but without premeditation. Judge James Williams sentenced him to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 25 years. In August of 2010, the Crown Attorney officially stayed the remaining 20 murder charges. Prosecutors reasoned that since Pickton was already serving the maximum sentence, there was no point in pursuing additional trials. This decision devastated many families who wanted justice for their loved ones. The case sparked a national crisis. The Canadian government was forced to acknowledge the epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous women. British Columbia formed the Missing Women Commission of Inquiry to investigate why police had failed so catastrophically. Deputy Chief Constable Doug Lee Pard of the Vancouver Police Department issued a tearful apology at a press conference, saying, "I wish from the bottom of my heart that we would have caught him sooner." For the detectives who worked the case, the trauma was immense. They spent months excavating human remains, identifying victims through dental records, and piecing together the final moments of women whose lives had been stolen. Many officers required counseling to cope with what they had seen. The smell of death, the horror of the crime scenes, the weight of knowing they could have stopped him earlier. It all took a psychological toll that would last for years. On May 19, 2024, Pickton was attacked in prison by another inmate named Martin Charest. Charest broke a broomstick handle and shoved it into Pickton's face. Correctional officers intervened, but Pickton was airlifted to a hospital and placed on life support. He died on May 31, 2024, from complications of the attack. He was 74 years old. If you believe these stories deserve to be told, if you believe these victims deserve to be remembered, hit that subscribe button and leave a comment below. Your engagement keeps these cases in the public eye and honors the lives that were lost. Don't let their stories fade into silence. Case 2. Andrei Romanovich Chikatilo. A body was found near a railway platform outside Shakhty, Russia, on September 20, 1983. The victim was a 15-year-old Armenian girl named Laura Sarkisian, had been stabbed dozens of times. Her eyes were gouged out, her abdomen sliced open, and her internal organs removed. This didn't look like the work of an amateur. This was the work of someone who had killed before and might kill again. Andrei Romanovich Chikatilo was born on October 16, 1936, in the village of Yabluchna in Soviet Ukraine. His childhood was marked by extreme poverty and trauma. Soviet leader Joseph Stalin's forced collectivization of agriculture had caused mass starvation, and Chikatilo's family struggled to survive. He later claimed he didn't eat bread until he was 12 years old, and that his family often ate grass and leaves to avoid starving. Throughout his childhood, Chikatilo's mother Anna told him repeatedly that before he was born, an older brother named Stepan had been kidnapped and cannibalized by starving neighbors. Whether this story was true or not remains unknown, but it haunted Chikatilo for his entire life. When World War II began, Chikatilo's father Roman was conscripted into the Red Army and later taken prisoner after being wounded in combat. Between 1941 and 1944, Chikatilo and his mother witnessed bombings, fires, and shootings as Nazi forces occupied Ukraine. On one occasion, they watched their own hut burn to the ground. With his father at war, Chikatilo shared a single bed with his mother. He was a chronic bedwetter, and she berated and beat him for every incident. In 1943, Chikatilo's mother gave birth to a baby girl named Tatiana. Because his father had been conscripted in 1941, he couldn't have fathered this child. It's speculated that Tatiana was conceived as a result of rape by a German soldier, possibly in Chikatilo's presence. As a teenager, Chikatilo discovered he suffered from chronic impotence, worsening his social awkwardness and self-hatred. He was painfully shy around women. At 17, he developed a crush on a girl named Lilia Barisheva, but he was too nervous to even ask her on a date. That same year, he jumped on an 11-year-old friend of his younger sister, wrestled her to the ground, and ejaculated as she struggled. This incident marked the beginning of his violent sexual fantasies. After graduating, Chikatilo applied for a scholarship at Moscow State University. Although he passed the entrance exam with good scores, he wasn't accepted. He believed his father's war record. He had been branded a traitor for being captured, had cost him the opportunity. Instead, he enrolled in a vocational school to become a communications technician. Between 1957 and 1960, Chikatilo served in the Soviet Army, assigned first to border guards in Central Asia, then to a KGB communications unit in East Berlin. His work record was unblemished, and he joined the Communist Party before his service ended. In 1963, Chikatilo married a woman named Feodosia Odnacheва in what was essentially an arranged marriage set up by his sister. According to Chikatilo, his marital sex life was minimal. In 1965, Feodosia gave birth to a daughter named Lyudmila. 4 years later, in 1969, a son named Yuri was born. Chikatilo obtained a degree in Russian literature and philology in 1970 and began working as a teacher. However, he was largely ineffective in the classroom. He couldn't maintain discipline, and students regularly mocked him. On several occasions, he entered the girls' dormitory, hoping to see them undressed, and once he discovered pupils having sex, which disturbed him because he hadn't done that, even by age 30. In May of 1973, Chikatilo committed his first known sexual assault. He swam toward a 15-year-old girl at a public pool, groped her breasts and genitals, and ejaculated as she struggled against him. Months later, he sexually assaulted and beat another teenage girl whom he had locked in his classroom. Despite these incidents, he was never disciplined. By 1978, Chikatilo's career as a teacher had ended due to numerous complaints of child molestation. That same year, he began working as a supply clerk for a factory, a job that required him to travel extensively across the Soviet Union. On December 22, 1978, Chikatilo committed his first documented murder. He lured 9-year-old Yelena Zakotnova to an old, dilapidated hut he had secretly purchased. He attempted to rape her, but couldn't achieve an erection. When the girl struggled, he choked her and stabbed her 3 times in the abdomen, ejaculating while stabbing the child. He then strangled her into unconsciousness and threw her body into the nearby Grushevka River. Numerous pieces of evidence linked Chikatilo to the murder: blood found in the snow near his house, neighbors who had seen him that evening, and a witness who saw him talking to Yelena at the bus stop. Yet despite all this, police arrested a 25-year-old laborer named Alexander Kravchenko instead. Kravchenko had a previous conviction for rape and murder, and police pressured his wife and her friend to change their alibis. Kravchenko confessed under duress, was tried, and although he retracted his confession at trial, he was convicted. In July of 1983, Kravchenko was executed by firing squad for Yelena's murder, a crime he didn't commit. Following Zakotnova's murder, Chikatilo discovered that he could only achieve sexual arousal and orgasm through stabbing and slashing victims to death. The urge to relive the experience overwhelmed him. He later claimed that initially he struggled to resist, often cutting short business trips to return home rather than face the temptation to search for a victim. On September 3, 1981, Chikatilo killed 17-year-old Larisa Tkachenko. He lured her into a forest with promises of vodka, then tore off her clothes and attempted intercourse. When he couldn't achieve an erection, he forced mud into her mouth to stifle her screams, then battered and strangled her to death. Having no knife, he mutilated her body with his teeth and a 6-foot-long stick. Her body was found the following day. Between 1982 and 1984, Chikatilo killed with increasing frequency. He targeted vulnerable individuals, young women, children, runaways, and vagrants at bus or railway stations. He would entice them with promises of food, money, or companionship, then lead them to secluded areas where he would stab, slash, and eviscerate them. Many victims had their eyes gouged out because Chikatilo believed an old Russian superstition that a murderer's image remains imprinted on the eyes of the dead. By January of 1983, police had tentatively linked 4 victims to the same killer. A Moscow police team headed by Major Mikhail Fetisov was sent to Rostov to direct the investigation, which became known as Operation Forest Path. Forensic analyst Viktor Burakov was assigned to head the case. As more bodies were discovered, the Soviet authorities could no longer deny that a serial killer was active. Investigators theorized that the killings had been committed by a group harvesting organs for transplant, a satanic cult, or a mentally ill individual. Much of the police effort concentrated on checking the alibis of anyone who had spent time in psychiatric wards or had been convicted of homosexuality or pedophilia. Several young men confessed to the murders under brutal interrogation, but bodies continued to be discovered, proving these confessions were false. 3 known homosexuals and a convicted sex offender committed suicide as a result of the investigators' heavy-handed tactics. On September 13, 1984, Chikatilo was observed by undercover detectives attempting to talk to young women at a Rostov bus station. They followed him as he wandered through the city, approaching women and committing acts of public lewdness. When he arrived at the Central Market, police arrested him. A search of his belongings revealed a knife, several lengths of rope, and a jar of Vaseline. A sample of Chikatilo's blood was taken, and the results revealed his blood type to be A, whereas semen samples found on 6 victims had been classified as type AB. This discrepancy largely discounted him as the killer. Chikatilo was found guilty of theft from a previous employer, sentenced to 1 year in prison, but released after serving 3 months in December of 1984. Upon his release, Chikatilo resumed killing. Between 1985 and 1990, he murdered at least 20 more victims across the Soviet Union. In November of 1985, police consulted psychiatrist Dr. Alexander Bukhanovsky, who created a 65-page psychological profile of the killer. Bukhanovsky described the perpetrator as a reclusive man aged between 45 and 50, who had endured a painful and isolated childhood. This individual was likely married with children, but suffered from impotence and could only achieve sexual arousal through violence. The murders themselves were an analog to the sexual intercourse he was incapable of performing. On November 6, 1990, Chikatilo killed his final victim, 22-year-old Svetlana Korostik, in Woodland near Donleskos station. Returning to the railway platform, he was noticed by undercover officer Igor Rybakov, who observed Chikatilo approaching a well to wash his hands and face. Chikatilo's coat had grass and soil stains on the elbows, and he had a small red smear on his cheek. Rybakov stopped him, checked his papers, but had no formal reason to arrest him. When Korostik's body was found on November 13th, police examined reports of all men stopped at the station. Chikatilo's name was not only in those reports, but it was also familiar. He had been questioned in 1984 and had been placed on a suspect list distributed throughout the Soviet Union in 1987. After checking with Chikatilo's employers, investigators were able to place him in various towns and cities at times when several victims had been murdered. Police placed Chikatilo under surveillance on November 14th. For 6 days, they watched as he approached lone young women and children, engaging them in conversation. On November 20th, after Chikatilo left his house with a jar filled with beer and wandered around attempting to make contact with children, police arrested him. He offered no resistance. On November 29th, at the request of investigators, Dr. Bukhanovsky was invited to assist in the questioning. Bukhanovsky read extracts from his psychological profile to Chikatilo. Within 2 hours, Chikatilo burst into tears and confessed to the crimes. Over the following days, he confessed to 56 murders, providing detailed descriptions of each killing, all of which were consistent with known facts. Chikatilo was brought to trial on April 14, 1992, charged with 53 counts of murder. He was tried in a specially constructed iron cage because of his disruptive behavior during proceedings. On several occasions, he exposed himself to the court or sang socialist anthems. On October 14, 1992, the court found Chikatilo guilty of 52 murders and sentenced him to death for each offense. On February 14, 1994, Chikatilo was taken from his death row cell to a soundproofed room in Novocherkassk prison and executed with a single gunshot behind the right ear. He was 57 years old. For the detectives who worked the case, the psychological toll was immense. Viktor Burakov devoted 8 years of his life to catching Chikatilo, examining crime scenes that defied comprehension, and wrestling with the knowledge that an innocent man had been executed for the first murder. The investigation revealed not just the horrors one man could commit, but also the failures of a system that allowed him to continue killing for over a decade. If these cases matter to you, if you believe we can stop evil people by creating awareness, then show your support by subscribing, liking this video, and leaving a comment. Let's make sure people stay alert and don't fall victim. Case 3. John Wayne Gacy. On March 17, 1942, John Wayne Gacy was born at Edgewater Hospital in Chicago, Illinois. He was the second of 3 children and the only son of John Stanley Gacy and Marion Elaine Robison. His father was an auto repair machinist and World War I veteran, and his mother was a homemaker. Gacy was close to his mother and 2 sisters, but had a difficult relationship with his alcoholic father, who was verbally and physically abusive. The elder Gacy frequently belittled his son, calling him dumb and stupid, and comparing him unfavorably with his sisters. One of Gacy's earliest childhood memories was of his father beating him at age 4 for accidentally disarranging car engine components. In 1949, Gacy's father whipped him after he and another boy were caught sexually fondling a young girl. The same year, a family friend began occasionally molesting Gacy. He never told his father, afraid he would be blamed. Despite their challenging relationship, Gacy loved his father, but felt he was never good enough in his father's eyes. Gacy was an overweight and unathletic child. Because of a heart condition, he was told to avoid sports. In the 4th grade, he began experiencing blackouts. He was hospitalized frequently because of these episodes, and in 1957, for a burst appendix. Gacy later estimated that between the ages of 14 and 18, he spent almost a year in hospital. His father suspected he was malingering, and on one occasion, openly accused his son of faking while he lay in a hospital bed. After high school, Gacy became involved in local Democratic Party politics. In 1962, his father bought him a car, but kept the title in his own name until Gacy paid for it. The father would confiscate the keys if Gacy didn't do as he said. In April of that year, Gacy purchased an extra set of keys. In response, his father removed the distributor cap and kept it for 3 days. Hours after his father replaced the cap, Gacy left home and drove to Las Vegas with $136, hoping to live with a cousin. In Las Vegas, Gacy worked in an ambulance service before being transferred to Palm Mortuary, where he worked as a mortuary attendant. He slept on a cot behind the embalming room. One evening, while alone, he climbed into the coffin of a teenage male, embracing and caressing the body before experiencing a sense of shock. This experience prompted him to return home. Gacy enrolled at Northwestern Business College and graduated in 1963. He took a management trainee position with the Nunn Bush Shoe Company and eventually became a department manager. In March of 1964, he became engaged to Marlon Myers, a co-worker. The couple married in September. Marlon's father purchased 3 Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurants in Waterloo, Iowa, and Gacy moved there to manage them. The offer was lucrative. Gacy would receive $15,000 per year, plus a share of the profits. He opened a club in his basement, where employees could drink alcohol and play pool. Although Gacy employed teenagers of both sexes, he socialized only with the males, often giving them alcohol before making sexual advances. Gacy's wife gave birth to a son in February 1966 and a daughter in March 1967. When Gacy's parents visited in July of 1966, his father privately apologized for the abuse he had inflicted, saying, "Son, I was wrong about you," as he shook Gacy's hand. In August of 1967, Gacy sexually assaulted 15-year-old Donald Voorhees Jr., the son of a local politician. Gacy lured the boy to his house with promises of showing him stag films, plied him with alcohol, then persuaded him to engage in mutual oral sex. Over the following months, Gacy abused several other youths. In March of 1968, Voorhees told his father about the assault. Police arrested Gacy and charged him with performing oral sodomy. Gacy vehemently denied the charges and demanded a polygraph test. The results were indicative of deception. On August 30th, Gacy promised one of his employees, 18-year-old Russell Schroeder, $300 if he physically assaulted Voorhees to discourage him from testifying. Schroeder sprayed mace in Voorhees' eyes and beat him, but Voorhees escaped and reported the assault. Schroeder was arrested and confessed that he had done so at Gacy's request. On November 7, 1968, Gacy pleaded guilty to 1 count of sodomy and was sentenced to 10 years imprisonment at Anamosa State Penitentiary. The same day, his wife petitioned for divorce. The court ruled in her favor, and Gacy never saw his first wife or children again. During his incarceration, Gacy rapidly acquired a reputation as a model prisoner. He rose to the position of head cook, joined the inmate JC chapter, and increased its membership from 50 to 650 men. He was granted parole on June 18, 1970, after serving 18 months. On his release, Gacy moved to Chicago to live with his mother. On February 12, 1971, he was charged with sexually assaulting a teenage boy, but the court dismissed the complaint when the boy failed to appear. On June 22nd, he was arrested and charged with aggravated sexual battery and reckless conduct, but these charges were dropped after the complainant attempted to blackmail him. With financial assistance from his mother, Gacy bought a ranch-style house at 8213 West Summerdale Avenue in Norwood Park Township, Illinois. He lived there until his arrest and, according to him, committed all his murders there. In August of 1971, Gacy became engaged to Carol Hoff, whom he had briefly dated in high school. They married on July 1, 1972. By 1975, Gacy had told his wife he was bisexual. After the couple had sex on Mother's Day that year, he informed her it would be the last time. He began spending most evenings away from home, only returning in the early morning with excuses about working late. Carol observed Gacy bringing teenage boys into his garage and found gay pornography and men's wallets inside the house. In October, Carol asked for a divorce, which was finalized on March 2, 1976. Through his membership in a local moose club, Gacy became aware of a clown club. In late 1975, he joined and created his own characters, Pogo the Clown and Patches the Clown. He performed at fundraising events, parades, and children's hospitals. Gacy later said that acting as a clown allowed him to regress into childhood. Gacy's first known murder occurred on January 3, 1972. He drove to the Loop to view ice sculptures, then lured 16-year-old Timothy Jack McCoy from Chicago's Greyhound bus terminal into his car. McCoy was on his way to his father's home in Omaha, Nebraska. Gacy took him on a sightseeing tour, then drove him home with the promise he could spend the night and catch his bus the next morning. Gacy claimed he woke early the following morning to find McCoy standing in his bedroom doorway holding a kitchen knife. He jumped from his bed, and McCoy raised both arms in surrender, accidentally cutting Gacy's forearm. Gacy disarmed him, banged his head against the wall, and kicked him. McCoy kicked back, and Gacy wrestled him to the floor and stabbed him repeatedly in the chest. As McCoy lay dying, Gacy washed the knife, went to his kitchen, and saw the makings of breakfast on the table. McCoy had set the table for two. He had walked into Gacy's room to wake him, while absent-mindedly carrying the knife. Gacy buried McCoy in his crawl space. In an interview years later, Gacy said that as he stabbed McCoy and listened to the gurgulations and gasping, he had experienced a mind-numbing orgasm. He added, "That's when I realized that death was the ultimate thrill." Over the next 6 years, Gacy murdered at least 32 more young men and boys. His usual method was to lure a victim to his house, often with promises of work or alcohol. He would ply them with drink or drugs, then produce handcuffs to show a magic trick. Once the victim was restrained, Gacy would rape and torture them before killing them by placing a rope tourniquet around their neck and progressively tightening it with a hammer handle. He referred to this as the rope trick, frequently telling his victim, "This is the last trick." Gacy usually stored victims' corpses under his bed for up to 24 hours before burying them in the crawl space, where he periodically poured lime to hasten decomposition. 26 victims were buried in the crawl space. 3 were buried elsewhere on his property, and 4 were discarded in the Des Plaines River. On July 31, 1975, 18-year-old John Butkovich, a PDM employee, disappeared after confronting Gacy over outstanding back pay. Butkovich's father called Gacy, who claimed he was sorry Butkovich had run away. Over the following 3 years, Butkovich's parents called police more than 100 times, urging them to investigate Gacy further. Gacy later admitted to strangling Butkovich and burying him under the concrete floor of his garage. By 1976, Gacy was killing with increasing frequency. On December 30, 1977, Gacy abducted 19-year-old college student Robert Donnelly from a Chicago bus stop at gunpoint. He drove him home, where he raped, tortured, and repeatedly drowned him to unconsciousness in a bathtub, making statements like, "Aren't we playing fun games tonight?" Donnelly later testified that he was in such pain that he asked Gacy to kill him. Gacy replied, "I'm getting round to it." After several hours, Gacy drove Donnelly to his workplace and released him, warning him that if he complained to police, they wouldn't believe him. Donnelly reported the assault, and police questioned Gacy on January 6, 1978. Gacy admitted to having had a slave sex relationship with Donnelly, but insisted everything was consensual. The police believed him and filed no charges. On the afternoon of December 11, 1978, Gacy visited the Nissan pharmacy in Des Plaines to discuss a potential remodeling deal. While within earshot of 15-year-old part-time employee Robert Peist, Gacy mentioned his firm and hired teenage boys at a starting wage of $5 per hour, almost double the pay Peist earned. Shortly after Gacy left, Peist's mother arrived to drive her son home for her birthday celebration. Peist asked his mother to wait, adding that, "Some contractor wants to talk to me about a job." He left the store at 9 o'clock, promising to return shortly. Peist was murdered shortly after 10 that evening at Gacy's home. When Peist failed to return, his family filed a missing person report. Police traced Gacy as the contractor Peist had most likely left to talk to. A check of Gacy's background revealed he had an outstanding battery charge and had been imprisoned in Iowa for sodomy of a 15-year-old boy. Police visited Gacy at his home. He denied offering Peist a job. When questioned as to how soon he could come to the station, he responded, "You guys are very rude. Don't you have any respect for the dead?" He claimed his uncle had just died. At 3:20 in the morning, Gacy arrived at the police station covered in mud, claiming he'd been in a car accident. Police obtained a search warrant on December 13th. The search revealed several suspicious items, including police badges, handcuffs, books about homosexuality and pedophilia, pornographic films, a 2x4 with holes drilled into each end, and a Nissan pharmacy photo receipt. Des Plaines police confiscated Gacy's vehicles and placed him under surveillance. On December 18th, over breakfast, Gacy remarked to detectives, "You know, clowns can get away with murder." On December 19th, investigators began compiling evidence for a second search warrant. The same day, Gacy's lawyers filed a civil suit against the Des Plaines police. When an officer flushed Gacy's toilet during surveillance, he noticed a rancid smell emanating from a heating duct, the smell of rotting corpses. On the evening of December 20th, Gacy drove to his lawyer's office. He appeared anxious and disheveled, and immediately asked for a drink. After downing 2 cupfuls of whiskey, Gacy picked up a newspaper covering Piast's disappearance and said, "This boy is dead. He's dead. He's in a river." Gacy then proceeded to give a rambling confession. He stated he had murdered at least 30 victims, most of whom he had buried in his crawl space, and had disposed of 5 others in the Des Plaines River. He dismissed his victims as male prostitutes, hustlers, and liars, adding he sometimes awoke to find dead, strangled kids with their hands cuffed behind their backs. After police obtained a second search warrant on December 21st, evidence technician Daniel Genty entered the crawl space and began digging. Within minutes, he uncovered putrefied flesh and a human arm bone. A police photographer uncovered a patella in the northeast corner. As they continued digging, they discovered skull after skull, confirming the scale of the murders. After being informed police had found human remains, Gacy provided a formal statement confessing to murdering approximately 30 young males. He claimed all were teenage runaways, or male prostitutes, who had entered his house willingly. Gacy was brought to trial on February 6, 1980, charged with 33 murders. At the request of his defense counsel, Gacy had spent over 300 hours with doctors to determine whether he was mentally competent to stand trial. His lawyers opted to have him plead not guilty by reason of insanity. The defense produced several psychiatric experts who testified they found Gacy to be a paranoid schizophrenic with multiple personalities. Prosecutors argued Gacy was sane and in full control of his actions. On March 11th, final arguments began. On March 12th, the jury deliberated for 1 hour and 50 minutes before finding Gacy guilty of 33 charges of murder. He was also found guilty of sexual assault and taking indecent liberties with a child. Gacy was sentenced to death and transferred to Menard Correctional Center, where he remained on death row for 14 years. On May 9, 1994, Gacy was transferred to Stateville Correctional Center to be executed. For his last meal, he ordered a bucket of KFC, French fries, a dozen fried shrimp, fresh strawberries, and a Diet Coke. At 12:40 in the morning on May 10th, the procedure to administer lethal injection began, although the chemicals unexpectedly solidified, clogging the tube. The execution team replaced the tube, and the execution resumed. The entire procedure took 18 minutes. Gacy's final spoken words were reported to be, "Kiss my ass." For the detectives who worked the case, the trauma was profound. They spent weeks excavating human remains from Gacy's crawl space, identifying victims through dental records, and piecing together the final moments of young men whose lives had been stolen. The smell of decomposition, the horror of discovering body after body, the weight of knowing these murders could have been prevented. It all took a psychological toll that lasted for years. Several officers required extensive counseling to cope with what they had witnessed. Case 4. David Parker. On November 6, 1939, David Parker Ray was born in Belen, New Mexico. His father, Cecil, was a mechanic, and his mother, Nettie, had been born in Texas. During his childhood, Ray and his younger sister, Peggy, lived with their mother's disciplinarian parents on a small ranch due to their family's poor financial condition. Ray's violent, alcoholic father visited sporadically, bringing magazines depicting sadomasochistic pornography. At Mountain Air High School, Ray was bullied by his peers for his shyness around girls, which resulted in his abusing alcohol and other drugs. His sexual fantasies of raping, torturing, and murdering women developed during his teenage years. When Ray was 14, his sister saw his sadomasochistic drawings and pornographic pictures of bondage practices, causing them to become estranged. He even alleged to his first wife that he had committed his first homicide in 1957 when he kidnapped a woman, tied her to a tree, and tortured and murdered her, though authorities were unable to verify his account. After completing high school, Ray received an honorable discharge from the United States Army, where his service included work as a general mechanic. He then worked as a maintenance man for the New Mexico Parks Department in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, for his entire adult life until his arrest. Ray met 37-year-old Cindy Hendy, who was fleeing convictions on grand theft and drug charges in Washington state. They became romantically involved and bonded over their shared violent sexual fantasies. Ray was divorced 4 times and had 2 children, including his accomplice daughter, Glenda Jessie Jean Ray. In 1986, Jessie had tried to warn the FBI about her father's criminal activity. FBI agent Doug Belden recalled her claims. She alleged that David Parker Ray was abducting and torturing women and selling them to buyers in Mexico. However, the allegations were too vague for the FBI to initiate an arrest. Ray sexually tortured and presumably killed his victims using whips, chains, pulleys, straps, clamps, leg spreader bars, surgical blades, electric shock machines, and saws. His torture room was a repurposed, soundproofed cargo trailer located immediately outside his Elephant Butte property. Ray stocked the trailer with numerous sex toys, torture implements, syringes, and detailed diagrams showing ways of inflicting pain, as well as a homemade electrical generator to deliver electrical shocks to his victims. In total, Ray spent $100,000 on the trailer. Ray constructed elaborate contraptions to confine his victims, including a fur-lined coffin and a makeshift pillory. There were also elaborate locks and pulleys to prevent captives from escaping. A mirror was mounted in the ceiling above the obstetric table, to which he strapped his victims, so they would be able to see themselves being raped and tortured. Ray often had an audio tape recording of his voice played for his victims whenever they regained consciousness. In the transcripts, Ray detailed how he would occasionally release his captives, abandoning them by the side of a country road after severely drugging them with barbiturates to induce amnesia. He would say, "I get off on mind games. After we get completely through with you, you're going to be drugged up real heavy with a combination of sodium pentothal and phenobarbital. You're going to be kept drugged a couple of days while I play with your mind. By the time I get through brainwashing you, you're not going to remember a thing about this little adventure." Ray would kidnap about 4 or 5 women a year, holding each of them captive for around 2 to 3 months. Exactly how many murder victims Ray claimed over the years is uncertain. Investigators believe he raped, tortured, and killed up to 60 individuals throughout his life, but they have not been able to locate any of their remains. A diary Ray kept detailed what he did to each victim, but it did not disclose where he buried their bodies. According to accomplice Cindy Hendy, Ray's fatal victims were dismembered and buried, dumped in Elephant Butte Lake or nearby ravines. After his arrest, Ray agreed to show authorities where he had buried his victims, but he died before he could do so, and Hendy was unable to assist investigators in recovering any possible bodies. In 2011, the Albuquerque FBI released hundreds of images of items collected during the investigation. The FBI believed some of the items, which included jewelry and clothes, may have been taken from victims. FBI agent Frank Fisher said, "We are asking family and friends of missing people to look over these photographs and contact us if they recognize any of these items." Among suspected victims was Billy Ray Bowers, 53, who disappeared from Phoenix, Arizona on September 25, 1988. On September 28, 1989, the body of an unknown man wrapped in a blue tarp was found by a fisherman at Elephant Butte Lake. He had been shot in the back of the head. The unidentified decedent was ultimately identified as Bowers in March of 1999, when authorities made dental record comparisons. While incarcerated, Hendy stated Ray told her he had killed Bowers and dumped his body in the river. On June 30, 1999, a fisherman named Ralph Tudor caught an 80-pound gunny sack on his fishing line. The sack was split along its seam and filled with what he thought was animal flesh. He then suspected it was human body parts and alerted authorities. The gunny sack was determined to contain human flesh, but no organs or bones, meaning the unidentified victim was mutilated and dismembered before being dumped in the lake. State police found bone fragments in Elephant Butte Lake belonging to a human leg in 2011. The DNA identified the victim as female, but she was not linked to any reported missing women. Cynthia Vigil was abducted from an Albuquerque parking lot by Ray and Hendy. She was taken to Elephant Butte, confined to the trailer, and tortured. After 3 days of captivity, Vigil escaped on March 22, 1999. She waited until Ray had gone to work, then unlocked her chains with keys Hendy had left on a nearby table. Hendy noticed Vigil's attempt to escape, and a fight ensued. During the struggle, Hendy broke a lamp on Vigil's head, but Vigil unlocked her chains and stabbed Hendy in the neck with an ice pick. Vigil fled while wearing only an iron slave collar and padlocked chains. She ran down the road seeking help from a nearby homeowner who called the police. Another victim, Angelica Montano, came forward with a similar story. She said she had been held captive by Ray after Hendy invited her to the house to pick up a cake mix. After being raped and tortured, Montano convinced the pair to release her along the highway. She was picked up by an off-duty law enforcement officer and told him what happened, but he did not believe her and left her at a bus stop. Police identified another victim, Kelly Garrett, from a videotape dated 1996. Garrett was found alive in Colorado. She testified she had gone to a bar, gotten in a fight with her husband, and decided to spend the night playing pool with friends. Ray's daughter Jessie, who knew Garrett, took her to the Blue Water Saloon and may have drugged her beer. She offered Garrett a ride home, but instead took her to her father's house. Garrett endured 2 days of torture before Ray drove her back to her home. Her husband did not believe she couldn't remember where she had been, and Garrett didn't know what to tell police, so she didn't contact them. Her husband sued for divorce. The FBI sent 100 agents to examine Ray's property and surroundings, but no identifiable human remains were found. The first trial, for crimes against Kelly Garrett, resulted in a mistrial after 2 jurors said they found her story unbelievable. Ray's defense was that the sex trailer was part of his fantasy life, and any sex was consensual. After a retrial, Ray was convicted on all 12 counts. A week into his trial for crimes against Vigil, Ray agreed to a plea bargain and was sentenced in 2001 to 224 years in prison for numerous offenses in the abduction and sexual torture of 3 young women. The plea deal was to obtain leniency for his daughter. Jessie was charged with kidnapping and criminal sexual penetration. She pled no contest and received a 30-month sentence with an additional 5 years to be served on probation. In 1999, 27-year-old accomplice Dennis Roy Yancey pleaded guilty to the murder of Marie Parker. Yancey confessed to helping Jessie lure Parker into captivity in her father's trailer. He said Parker was tortured and that Ray forced him to strangle her to death. He was sentenced to 30 years. In 2010, Yancey was paroled after serving 11 years, but the release was delayed. In 2011, he was charged with violating his parole and remained in custody until 2021. In 2000, Cindy Hendy, an accomplice who testified against Ray, received a sentence of 36 years for her role in the crimes. She was released on July 15, 2019. On May 28, 2002, Ray was taken to the Lee County Correctional Facility in Hobbs, New Mexico, to be questioned by state police. He died of a heart attack before the interrogation took place. He was 62 years old. For the detectives and FBI agents who investigated Ray's crimes, the psychological trauma was severe. They listened to audio tapes in which Ray described in graphic detail the tortures he inflicted. They examined hundreds of photographs and items that may have belonged to victims whose bodies were never found. They interviewed survivors who recounted unspeakable horrors. The knowledge that Ray likely killed dozens of women whose remains would never be recovered, whose families would never have closure, weighed heavily on every investigator involved. Many required counseling to process what they had witnessed and heard. If you stand against the kind of evil that these men represented, then show your support. Subscribe to this channel, like this video, and leave a comment below. Your engagement ensures these stories are never forgotten and honors the lives that were stolen.
I want to thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you're going to love what's coming next. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for instant updates on our latest videos. See you in the next one.